Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sonya. I am so excited for today's video. The time has finally come that I'm going to share everything I knit in 2025. I love these videos. I always look forward to them every single year, and this year I'm excited to make my own. So this year I've had a lot more time than previous years to knit, and so I feel like I was able to get a lot done and really challenged myself. I tried a lot of new techniques and took on a couple ambitious projects. So I'm excited to share them all with you. Grab your knitting, settle in. This might be a longer video, so I hope you enjoy. To start, I wanted to share some of my knitting statistics from this year and kind of give you a picture of what my year looked like in knitting. If you're only interested in the try-on portion, that's alright, just skip to this timestamp, but I thought I would just briefly share a couple of fun statistics. So I knit a total of 15 finished objects this year, 4 of which were pullover sweaters, 5 of which were cardigans, 3 summer knits, 1 dress, 1 skirt, and 1 baby knit. The baby knit I don't have with me, so I'll just briefly share about it now. I knit the baby storm sweater by Petite Knit for my best friend who had her baby this year, and it was a really fun knit. I used stash yarn that was a cotton and superwash wool blend, so it was machine washable for her and easy maintenance. Throughout the project, I had to just keep stopping and admiring how stinking cute it was to see a mini knit growing on my needles. That was the first baby knit I've ever knit, and I foresee some more baby knits in my future. This year, I did not complete any accessories. I am a garment knitter at heart, and this year really exemplified that. I have knit accessories in the past, and I have some plans to knit a few in 2026, but I definitely much prefer garment knitting. My most knit from designer this year was Petite Knit with 5 total projects, although a close second was My Favorite Things Knitwear with 4 projects. I did, however, knit from a lot of new designers that I had never knit from before, including AegyoKnit, Johanna, Gehrisch, Olin Knitwear, Other Loops, Gregoria Fibers, and Wool and Beyond. I definitely had a clear theme in terms of my most used yarn brand. I fell in love with Isager this year. I knit 6 projects with their yarn. The yarns from them that I used the most included Alpaca 1 and Alpaca 2, and then Aran Tweed. Absolutely love all of those yarns. My most used needle size this year was 4 millimeters. My longest whip was on my needles for 284 days, and that was the Mamba Dress, which is what I'm wearing now. If you watched my last video, you got a sneak peek of it, but I'll be giving you a good view of it in the try-on here. And then my shortest whip was 11 days on my needles, and that's actually tied between 2 projects. The baby storm sweater was only on my needles for 11 days, but so was the Anker's summer shirt, both of which are by Petite Knit. Both were very quick knits and very enjoyable as well. I knit a total of 7 projects this year from stash yarn, and out of my 15, that's almost half, so I'm pretty happy with that. Like I said, I tried a lot of new techniques this year, and I'm gonna just list them all off because there's a lot. I tried diamond cables, honeycomb cables, moss stitch. Can you believe I'd never done moss stitch before? Saddle shoulder construction, steeking, cables without a cable needle, 3 needle bind off, modifying stitch and row counts to accommodate a gauge that was vastly different than the recommended, tubular bind off, knitting a button band as you go, circular yoke, reading a fully charted pattern, and split splicing yarn join. That one I really love, and I use it on a couple projects, and that one's super nice because you have barely any ends to weave in at the end. My favorite process knit this year was a set that I made using the Isager Aran Tweed yarn, and I knit sweater number 25 and skirt number 1 as a matching set by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And that was such a fun process. It was very much like dopamine knitting. I saw it on her Instagram post, and I immediately impulsively bought it and cast it on, and I had a blast. It was great. I don't always do impulse cast-ons, but I think every once in a while it's fun to just let the inspiration take over and just drop everything you're doing and go after it. My favorite product knit, though, was the Mamba Dress. I am absolutely in love with this finished product. The process I'll talk a little bit more about in the try-on section. It was fun, but it was definitely a labor of love. Yeah, so this year I felt like I really grew as a knitter and improved my skills, tried a lot of new techniques, like I said, and really took on some ambitious projects that maybe in past years I would have been too scared to approach, but I just went for it this year and pushed myself, and I feel like that allowed me to grow more than I have in previous years, where I've stuck mostly to stockinette. So let's get into the try-on section and get into every garment I made this year. The first sweater I finished this year was the Busan Sweater by AegyoKnit. I actually started this sweater back in 2023, in September of that year. I had tried to use this yarn for 2 separate sweater patterns before finally deciding on the Busan sweater. I started this sweater then in 2023 after partially unraveling the previous projects with this yarn, but soon got discouraged and lost momentum because unraveling a strand of mohair and a strand of merino held together is a nightmare. The 2 yarns held together created a sport weight yarn knit up on 5mm needles, which gives a very open and lightweight fabric. The mohair conceals the openness of the fabric though, and it gives a very uniform look. But because the fabric is less dense, I find the garment has amazing drape and strikes that balance between too warm and not warm enough. I also love the color of this yarn combo, and I like that the core of the mohair strand is a slightly lighter blue, which gives a slight visual interest to the fabric instead of it just being a flat color. The only area where I deviated from the pattern was that I didn't do an Italian bind off for 2x2 ribbing. I opted for just a traditional cast off where you knit 2 and slip 1 stitch over the other. I haven't tried an Italian bind off for 2x2 ribbing before, and I'm a little hesitant because I'm not so sure I'll like the finished look. Maybe that's something I'll challenge myself to try in 2026. But overall, I love this sweater. I love how it turned out, and I'm glad I persisted to use up this yarn. Next, I finished the Auguste Cardigan, another project that was started in 2023 and left untouched until the start of 2025. Honestly, I don't really remember why I put this project down and didn't touch it for so long, but I think I had gotten to the sleeves and was contemplating modifying the pattern, and I think I was just feeling intimidated. So when I picked this back up at the start of 2025, I decided that I did in fact want to modify the pattern and add decreases to the sleeves. However, if you watched my knitting fails video, you know that this decision didn't really work out. To keep the alternating cable pattern, I had to stop at a certain number of stitches at the cuff, but basically, after finishing both sleeves, only then did I realize that I had made the sleeves not only too short, but also too tight. In that other video, I discussed my thoughts on the fit issues with this garment in depth, but overall, I do still think it's pretty, and the yarn is so nice, so I'm thinking that I will go back and finish weaving in the ends and add buttons, and maybe save it for my daughter someday. Although I'm still calling it a finished object for 2025. Speaking of the yarn, this was stash yarn from my first ever order placed with Knitting for Olive back in 2022 when I was still in grad school. I got it back then for a Christmas present, and it felt so special to knit with this yarn. And now, Knitting for Olive has become a tried and true for me and has appeared in multiple projects since then over the last couple years. Next, I knit a beautiful matching set using Isager yarn for the first time. I knit sweater number 25 and skirt number 1, both by My Favorite Things Knitwear, after seeing the designer post the exact same set on her Instagram. It was totally an impulse dopamine cast on, and I had a blast knitting it. Now, Pictured here, I am wearing the Louvre sweater by Petite Knit, and that is because I actually ended up fully unraveling my sweater number 25 and re-knitting the yarn into the Louvre sweater due to a couple issues with the fit after wearing it for a while. I also talked about this project in my knitting fails video, so if you're interested in a more in-depth explanation about that process, you can go watch that video. I'm happy I did that though, because this is also a yarn that's just too good to be wasted in a sweater I don't wear. Sweater number 25 was on my needles for only 14 days, and that was the absolute fastest I'd ever knit a sweater, and it was totally due to how much I loved working with this yarn. I could not put it down. The Louvre sweater was on my needles for 20 days, and it was also super fun to knit. I modified the stitch and row counts for this pattern to accommodate my larger gauge, as mine was vastly different from what the pattern recommends. So that was a fun learning experience, and I think it turned out beautifully. Skirt number 1 was also extremely fun to knit and was the first skirt I ever knit. It was on my needles for a total of 17 days. I was a little bit worried about it being see-through or warping out of shape, but this yarn solved both of those worries. It bloomed so beautifully with blocking, like totally transformed in drape and softness. However, it did retain its structure, and that really helps the skirt keep its shape, even when you're sitting in it all day long. Unfortunately, I can't really wear it this season, now that I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm honestly surprised I was able to squeeze it on for this try-on, but hopefully next winter I'll be able to wear it again. I did modify the hem of the skirt to be a little bit longer, and I finished it with a folded hem since mine kept flipping up even after doing the bind-off method suggested in the pattern, which says it should prevent that. I'm glad I got 3 projects worth of knitting from this one yarn, and I hope to find another opportunity to use Isager Aran tweed again soon. All the colorways are so gorgeous, so if you've knit any projects with it, please tell me what you made in the comments so I can get inspired. Next is yet another project that I included in my 2025 knitting fails video, and from the comments, it seems like a lot of you guys have knit this and didn't like the finished results as well. I went into depth about what went wrong with this garment in that video, so I'll keep it brief here, but you can obviously see some fit issues. The lack of short row shaping makes it kind of fussy to wear because I have to keep pulling it down in the front and readjusting. And you can clearly see from this try-on that the bottom is flaring out. Like I mentioned in the other video, I might revisit and make some modifications to fix these issues next summer, but it's such a bummer because the design of this blouse is so gorgeous and such an elevated basic that had the potential to be a wardrobe staple for me. As for the yarn though, this was one of 2 projects completed with this yarn from Sandnes Garn. I really love it for a summer yarn, and I don't always love summer yarns, but this one was a joy to knit with, and it creates a beautiful finished fabric. I find the drape to be beautiful, and I didn't have too much trouble keeping even tension like I sometimes can when using plant fibers. And even in a DK weight, I find it's cooling and moisture wicking enough to wear in the hot and humid Midwest summer. Cardigan number 9 was on my needles for 32 days and is another stash yarn project. It's also the first time I ever knit a saddle shoulder construction. I found that construction to be really fun. I know it was really popular this year in a lot of designs, and I saw a lot of Ozetta patterns using this construction. When I first saw this construction style though, I didn't know if I liked it, but with this sweater, I thought it was a cool design element that elevated it from a boring basic. I also loved the double knitting detail of the collar. This detail is ultimately what made me choose this pattern over other options. Even though the finished object is beautiful and the process was fun in terms of a new construction method, it hurt my hands a lot, and I could only knit on it for short periods of time. It uses 6mm needles, and I think my gauge was a little tight, causing each stitch to require a lot of movement and force. Last year I knit the Levitate wrap by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which also calls for 6mm needles. And even with a gauge that wasn't as dense as this one, it still hurt my hands to knit. I had to take a full week off of knitting after finishing the body of that sweater, so I'm thinking I'll try to avoid anything 6mm or above in 2026 just to be safe. Upon finishing this garment, I actually wasn't in love with the color. It was a little bit too aqua or seafoam for my preference, as I like more of a true blue. But the sparkles and the fact that I used up some gifted stash yarn made me happy. And I actually find myself wearing this more than I thought I would. The sleeves could have been a little bit longer, but I don't mind too much. If I were to knit this again, though, I would choose a yarn that allows for a bit more of an open gauge so my hands don't hurt so much. Next, I finished blouse number 1, another My Favorite Things knitwear pattern. I drooled over this one for a while before finally deciding to knit it. I had trouble deciding on what color I wanted, but I finally went with this icy blue pure silk from Knitting for Olive. This project was extremely fun to knit, and I felt like it came together really quickly. I loved holding the pure silk double. It has such a luxurious feel and weight to it. I also think this baby blue color is such a beautiful color and suits me so well. I feel really beautiful and classy wearing this knit. I did make one modification, which was to size down my needles from 4.5mm to 4mm to create a gauge that wasn't quite as open and wasn't as transparent. The fit and dimensions didn't really change that much since my gauge was similar enough. Oh, I also did lengthen the body and the sleeves to ensure the proper proportions for my desired fit. I didn't want a cropped look, and I think it turned out perfect. I was a little unsure about the simple finishings, or lack thereof, at the collar, but after blocking and wear, it doesn't roll too much and it still looks very classy and polished in my opinion. This is a pattern I could totally see myself knitting again in the future. I think it would be fun to do a subtle melange by holding 2 strands of slightly different colors together, just like she did in the original sample. After my phase with My Favorite Things knitwear patterns, I entered into a little petite knit phase. So next I finished the Maggie Cardigan, which was on my needles for 29 days. This pattern has a fun construction at the shoulder, which is actually my second time doing that construction, although I still don't exactly know what it's called. If you know the name of that construction technique, please let me know in the comments, because I really love it. Anyway, though, I loved this project and really enjoyed knitting it in a fun pink color. I think the finishings of this pattern are simple yet polished. I do wish, however, that I had knit a size bigger. Now, my measurements have changed since becoming pregnant, so maybe it will fit better around the bust at some point down the road, but I'm thinking I could maybe just stretch the body to provide a bit more positive ease when blocking. This yarn does have a decent amount of alpaca content though, which has been known to grow over time, so maybe that issue will solve itself as I wear it more. Either way, I think it turned out super cute, and I think it strikes a balance between playful and sophisticated. I'm also happy with my choice to go with simple buttons that kind of blend into the garment. The original sample has black buttons on a gray cardigan, which I thought was a really striking look, but with the pink, I thought it would be a little too stark. I contemplated so many different button options before deciding to go simple, and I think ultimately it has a classic, timeless look that I won't get tired of. I can't wait to style this piece for spring after baby girl arrives. Next, I stepped out of my comfort zone a little bit to take on the gorgeous and slightly intimidating Dagmar Jacket by Petite Knit, and I'm so glad I did. I probably would have shied away from a project like this in the past and instead just drooled over it from afar, but this year I challenged myself not to be self-limiting and to learn new skills. And surprisingly, this project was way more approachable than I thought it would be. The charts were extremely fun and really intuitive. I was able to memorize the several different cable motifs quickly and only really needed to look at the chart for the yoke shaping and to establish the sleeves. I also loved this project for the yarn. I used the recommended yarn from a yarn brand that I can't pronounce, but have seen Petite Knit use so many times. I've been wishing to knit with this yarn all year, and after deciding on this project, it did take me a few weeks to source this yarn. Almost none of the stores selling this yarn online ship to the US, so once I finally did find a store to ship it to me, and without an atrocious shipping fee, it felt beyond special to knit with it for this project. Unfortunately, I did fall in love with this yarn brand, and now I want to knit several more projects with their yarns, but I don't know if I'll be able to source any other yarns for future projects. Maybe I'll keep my eye on Ravelry, where people are selling from their stash. We'll have to see. Now for my pride and joy make of this year, the Mamba dress. This was by far my biggest and most ambitious project this year. I cast it on in January and I finished it in November. So that's a total of 284 days on my needles. Now, I did put it down for a while in the summer, but it still took such a long time to knit. This dress is knit bottom up, so you start by just jumping right into knitting a tube for about 4 feet, or your desired length, on 4mm needles with cable repeats every fourth round. So at times it was tough to keep going when it was hard to see my progress. Luckily, though, these cables could be done without a cable needle, which saved a lot of time. But regardless, this project did take a lot of perseverance. When I blocked this, I was able to stretch the length by about 4 inches, which was amazing because after finishing it and trying it on pre-blocking, I was wishing it was longer. It was hard to tell exactly how long it would be while I was knitting it because it's knit bottom up, so trying it on was hard, but I'm so happy with it in the end. It ended up being the perfect length. This dress totally transformed with blocking. Not only did the length change dramatically, well, that was partly due to how aggressively I pulled it, but the drape of the dress also changed a lot. Before blocking, it clung to my legs and it didn't really have any flow or movement at the bottom, but now it hangs beautifully and it flows like a skirt should. I also love the weight of this fabric. 4mm is such a sweet spot for fabric density I've discovered this year. I don't get too hot in this dress, even though I'm covered head to toe in wool and alpaca. It's truly the most perfect winter dress, and I highly encourage you all to knit one yourself. I want one in every color now, but I don't know that I'll have the mental capacity to knit another one this year, but maybe someday. This one should be familiar to any returning viewers, and it was the first make as part of my series where I'm knitting my dream capsule wardrobe. This project was on my needles for 35 days, and it was such a fun project. I'm so happy with the finished product. I'm excited to see how the Positive Ease drapes after I have this baby, because right now, the fit is obviously a little skewed with my tummy taking up so much real estate. But I think it turned out to be a very classic style and will last many years in my wardrobe. I love the decreases on the sleeves and how they're incorporated into the design of the garment. This sweater also totally transformed with blocking, as you would expect with an all-over ribbed piece, but the ribbing relaxed and opened up so beautifully. However, I do wish the finished fabric had a little more drape, but maybe it'll continue to soften with wear. Overall, though, I'm super happy with this sweater and I'm excited to wear it for the rest of the winter. Next, I finished a summer knit that had been hibernating for several months after I lost Yarn Chicken. I cast this one on in June and worked on it for several weeks before running out of yarn. For some reason, I could not be bothered to buy one more skein, so it lived in my yarn cabinet until December. However, I'm happy to say that I did get it finished before the end of the year, and I think it turned out super beautiful. However, you can obviously see that it fits extremely snug right now. But once summer rolls around and I'm not super pregnant, I think it'll fit beautifully. I modified the bottom hem of this piece to feature extra long 2x2 ribbing in order to cinch the waist in. I plan to wear this with midi skirts in the summer, and I think having that detail will give a nice hourglass look and be really flattering. I might go back and add elastic to the inside of the bottom ribbing just to ensure that it doesn't stretch out over time, as this yarn has no wool content, so I am a little worried about it losing its shape. I would definitely recommend this pattern for summer knitting. It's so beautiful, and the stripes of lace and ribbing make you really feel like you're making a lot of progress quickly. And the final garment I finished this year was a steeked cardigan by Wool and Beyond. This was the second sweater I finished in my Knitting My Dream Capsule Wardrobe series. By the way, if you're interested in that series, I do have plans to post a second episode later this month. But anyway, this project was also one that felt very ambitious for me. I had never steeked before, so I was excited for the challenge. The steeking process went actually surprisingly smooth and wasn't nearly as intimidating as it sounds. I used my sewing machine to secure the raw edges, and that worked great. In the future, I'd be curious to try some of the other methods out there, like crocheting or felting the raw edges. So throughout this project, I was second guessing my yarn choice the whole time, right up until the end. If I had an unlimited budget, I would have chosen Cardiff Cashmere Classic for this project. And the whole time I was comparing my yarn choice to that Dream yarn. Someday I'll knit with that yarn, but this year wasn't it. However, after finishing it, I actually love my yarn choice. I think it turned out pretty close to the look I was going for, which was a light heathered gray with some subtle marling and depth, and a halo that wasn't quite as strong as what you get with mohair. The strand of alpaca gives the perfect halo for the look I was going for, and I'm so in love with the finishings of this pattern. And that's ultimately what sold me on it. I've never seen finished edges like this before, and the construction was really fun to try. I also appreciate that I didn't have to do any ribbing on this sweater, as I was knitting it at the same time as my twist loop sweater, which is nothing but ribbing. Finally, I love the buttons I chose for this sweater. The little pearls have such a sweet and classic look, and I think they look great picking out of the rolled hem button band. However, I do need to go back in and make the buttonholes a little tighter because it likes to pop open, but I think that should be an easy fix. This is another piece I'm excited to style in a lot of different ways. I think it's going to be a go-to versatile piece that I'll get a lot of wear out of over the next several years. If you're thinking about making this, don't let the steeking scare you because it is so worth it, and it's not as scary as you think. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and maybe you got inspired for some of your 2026 knitting plans. I would encourage you in 2026 to take on ambitious plans and just go for it, because I did that this year and I ended up with some pieces that I really love. Thanks for joining again. Let me know what your favorite was down in the comments, or if you've knit any of these yourself as well. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.